Adanna stood in front of her mirror, staring at the reflection that seemed to question her very existence. The lace gown she had ironed twice that morning now looked like a mockery. Every detail, the careful makeup, the soft curls pinned to the side, felt like an armor she wore against her family's ridicule. She could already imagine it. The laughter, the whispers, the forced smiles. The annual family reunion had become a battlefield, and she was always the target. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, "Adanna, you're 32. When will you bring a man home? Your cousins are all married. Even Linda just got engaged. Linda, the golden cousin, the one whose Instagram was a parade of luxury, designer bags, beach vacations, and the perfect fiancé who never missed a photo opportunity." Adanna had grown numb to the comparisons, but the sting never fully disappeared. She wasn't unattractive. She had a quiet beauty, the kind that didn't shout but lingered. She was hardworking, independent, and gentle. But in her family's world, none of that mattered without a ring on her finger. As she sat on the edge of her bed, her phone buzzed. A message from her cousin Linda. "Hope you're not coming alone this time. Oh, don't embarrass us again." Adanna's fingers tightened around the phone. The message burned like salt on an open wound. That was when the thought slipped into her mind, desperate, reckless, but strangely comforting. What if? I don't go alone this time. That afternoon, she stopped by the supermarket near her office. She wasn't there to buy much, just a few groceries to distract her from her thoughts. The hum of the air conditioner and the soft music playing overhead gave her a sense of calm until she saw him. He was kneeling by the cleaning section, wiping the floor with quiet precision. A simple cleaner's uniform clung to his frame. His sleeves rolled up to reveal strong arms dusted with the faint marks of work. He wasn't striking at first glance, but there was something in his eyes, calm, observant, kind. She found herself staring longer than she should, and when their eyes met, he smiled. Not the forced smile of someone trying to please, but a small, genuine curve of the lips that made her heart flutter unexpectedly. "Excuse me," he said softly, moving his mop aside so she could pass. "Thank you," she murmured. Then, as she walked away, something tugged at her chest, a strange impulse she couldn't explain. She turned back. "Wait. Can I ask you something strange?" The man straightened, surprised but curious. "Depends on how strange." She hesitated. Her cheeks flushed, but the words tumbled out anyway. "Would you be willing to pretend to be my fiancé for one night?" He blinked, clearly caught off guard. Then, to her shock, he chuckled. Not mockingly, but softly, like someone who found amusement in life's absurdities. "That's definitely strange," he said. "Why me?" "I don't know," she admitted. "Maybe because you look kind, and I don't have time to think of anyone else." He studied her face, then said, "You must really want to prove something." "I just don't want to be mocked again," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "Please, just one night." He was silent for a moment, his eyes thoughtful. Then he nodded. "All right, I'll do it." Adanna blinked. "You will?" "Yes," he said, smiling faintly. "Not for money, just curiosity. I want to see what happens when people finally stop underestimating someone." She exhaled, half relieved, half confused. "Thank you. What's your name?" "Richard," he replied. "Richard and Mosu." They agreed to meet the next day. Adanna offered to buy him clothes, get him a haircut, anything to make him look the part. He only smiled and nodded. That night she barely slept. Her mind replayed the events over and over. She was doing something wild, foolish even. But for once, she felt in control. The next afternoon, Richard arrived at her small apartment. He looked shy standing by the door, still in his work clothes, holding a plastic bag that probably contained nothing more than a bottle of water and an old phone. She had already laid out a crisp navy blue suit she'd bought. "Try this," she said, handing it to him. Minutes later, when he stepped out of the room, Adanna froze. The transformation was almost unreal. The humble cleaner from yesterday now looked like a man who belonged in a boardroom. The suit fit him perfectly, his hair freshly trimmed, his posture calm but confident. Even his silence carried a quiet authority. Adanna felt a strange flutter in her chest, something she quickly suppressed. "You look good," she said, forcing herself to sound casual. He smiled. "So do you. Are you ready for your grand family show?" She laughed nervously. "As ready as I'll ever be." That evening, as they drove to the reunion, her heart pounded. She had no idea what she'd gotten herself into, but she knew one thing. This was her moment to finally silence the whispers. The reunion hall shimmered with gold and laughter. Chandeliers sparkled above the marble floor, and the scent of perfume hung thick in the air. Laughter echoed, the kind that tried too hard to sound happy. Adanna held Richard's hand tightly as they entered. Conversations paused. Heads turned. Eyes widened. Linda was the first to speak. "Adanna?" she said, blinking in surprise. "Who's this?" Adanna smiled with newfound confidence. "My fiancé Richard?" A wave of murmurs rippled through the room. Richard gave a polite nod, his calm gaze sweeping across the faces that had mocked Adanna for years. Linda's lips curved into a tight smile. "Oh, really? Congratulations! And what do you do, Richard?" "I clean," he said simply. The silence that followed was sharp. Linda laughed, thinking it was a joke. "Clean? Like floors," Richard said, his tone steady, unbothered. Several cousins exchanged awkward glances. Someone coughed to cover a chuckle. Adanna's mother shot her a horrified look that screamed, "What have you done?" But Richard's composure never wavered. He took Adanna's hand and smiled at her, a small, reassuring smile that steadied her trembling heart. Linda recovered quickly, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Well, at least you're honest. Some people like to pretend they're what they're not." The jab was obvious, but Richard didn't react. Instead, he said, "Honesty has a way of surviving where pride destroys." The room went silent again. His words hung in the air, weighty and calm. Later that evening, the party grew livelier. Music played, wine flowed, and relatives took turns flaunting their wealth. But somehow, eyes kept returning to Adanna and her mysterious fiancé, the cleaner who looked and spoke like someone from another world. Meanwhile, Linda floated around with her own fiancé, Derek, tall, handsome, and dressed in designer everything. He wore arrogance like a crown. At one point, he leaned toward Richard with a smirk. "So, you're the janitor turned prince tonight, huh?" Richard looked at him quietly and said, "No, just a man who keeps his hands clean and his conscience cleaner." Derek laughed, but there was unease behind his grin. As the night went on, Adanna began to see something she hadn't expected, the way Richard carried himself, how he spoke gently but firmly, how he made people pause and listen without even trying. And for the first time in her life, she felt proud. Not of a performance, but of herself. She realized she hadn't brought Richard to prove anything. She had brought him to remind herself she deserved peace, even if it came dressed in simplicity. But the night was far from over, because before the evening ended, pride, the same pride that mocked and measured people by wealth, was about to crumble in front of everyone. And when it did, Adanna would see that what began as pretense was destiny in disguise. The reunion was in full swing. Laughter echoed from one corner to another, but beneath it all was tension, the unspoken kind that could slice through glass. Adanna stood with a glass of juice in her hand, smiling politely as relatives passed compliments laced with curiosity. They asked where she met Richard, how long they'd been engaged, and what exactly he did for a living. Each question felt like a test she hadn't studied for. But Richard was calm. Whenever someone cornered him with a snide question, he answered with warmth and grace that left them unsettled. Linda, however, wasn't ready to back down. She strutted over, her gold heels clicking against the floor, her arm looped through Derek's. "Adanna, I have to say," she began, her voice sugar-sweet, "you really outdid yourself tonight. He cleans floors, but somehow looks elegant." Derek snorted a quiet laugh, and Linda's friends giggled behind their wine glasses. Adanna's chest tightened, but Richard simply smiled. "You know," he said, "it takes more effort to clean a heart than a floor." Linda's smirk faltered for a moment. Then she laughed it off. "Interesting. So, how long have you two been together?" Adanna hesitated, searching for words. "A few months," she said. "Months," Linda repeated loudly, eyes darting around as if she wanted everyone to hear. "And you're already engaged? Wow, that's quick. Some of us waited years before being proposed to." She flaunted her diamond ring, catching the light deliberately. Richard's gaze softened. "Sometimes it's not about how long you've known someone, but how deeply you understand them." Linda's laughter sounded forced this time. Across the hall, Adanna's mother was whispering to Aunt Grace, Linda's mother. Their faces were drawn in quiet embarrassment. Adanna felt the shame crawling back in, but before it could take hold, Richard leaned closer and whispered, "You're doing fine. Don't shrink." His words steadied her. The night wore on. People began gathering for toasts, speeches, and a little family gossip disguised as humor. That was when things began to shift. One of Linda's friends, a sharp-tongued cousin named Favor, blurted out, "So, Adanna, what's it like dating someone from a different background?" The word different carried venom. Richard turned toward her and said gently, "Every background is made of earth. Some polish theirs, others walk on it. But in the end, we all return to it." The table went silent. Favor blinked, unsure how to respond. Adanna tried to hide a smile. Richard wasn't defensive, yet every word he spoke landed with quiet power. But Linda wasn't done. "Richard," she said, eyes narrowing, "you speak like a philosopher. Tell me, where did you learn to talk like that? The mop room?" He tilted his head, unbothered. "No. Life has been my teacher. People have been my lessons." Something about the way he said it, steady, unflinching, made the laughter die before it began. Adanna watched as Linda forced another smile, but her eyes betrayed her irritation. For years, she had been the family's symbol of success, the beautiful one, the accomplished one. And here, in one evening, a man in a borrowed suit had stolen the attention she was used to commanding. As the night deepened, Derek grew restless. He had been sneaking glances at his phone, stepping aside to whisper to someone. Linda, caught up in her pride, didn't notice, but Adanna did. So did Richard. When Derek returned from one of his mysterious calls, Richard's eyes followed him, calm but observant. There was a quiet knowing in them, like a man who'd already seen the truth. By the time the dinner plates were cleared and the music softened, the air felt charged with something unseen, as if life was waiting for the right moment to reveal its secret. And that moment was closer than anyone realized. It started with a scream. Not the kind of scream that comes from fear, but from humiliation. Linda's voice cut through the music. "What do you mean the transfer failed?" she yelled at Derek, who stood frozen, phone in hand. Everyone turned. The hall fell into a hush. "What's going on?" Aunt Grace asked, stepping forward. Linda turned, her face pale with fury. "This useless man," she shouted. "He told me he owned a company. He said he was investing in land deals. Now I find out he's been using my name to collect money from people." Gasps echoed through the room. Derek's mask slipped, he stammered. "Linda, please, calm down, she snapped. "You scammed me, Derek. You lied to me." Her mother rushed forward to steady her, but Linda pulled away, trembling. "Do you know how much money I gave him? How much I've bragged about him to everyone?" Her voice broke, and tears streaked down her perfectly powdered face. Silence hung thick. The same relatives who had once envied her stood in stunned disbelief. The perfect fiancé was a fraud. Adanna stood quietly beside Richard, her heart heavy with mixed emotions. She didn't feel joy, just sorrow for how easily pride could turn into pain. Derek tried to speak again, but Richard's calm voice interrupted. A lie always shines like gold at first, until the light hits it. Derek turned to him, his expression bitter. "You think you're better than me?" "No," Richard said softly. "But I know that truth doesn't need to pretend." The hall remained silent. Everyone's eyes turned toward Richard now, the man they had mocked hours earlier. Adanna's mother stepped forward, confusion in her gaze. "Who exactly are you, young man?" Richard hesitated for a brief moment, then said quietly, "I never meant to make a scene. I came here because he nodded toward Adanna, asked for my help. And I agreed because I saw sincerity in her eyes." Linda, still shaken, snapped, "Help? You call pretending help? You're a cleaner. What do you even know about sincerity?" The words struck the air like poison, but Richard didn't flinch. Instead, he reached into his pocket and handed his phone to Adanna. "Open the gallery," he said. She did. What she saw made her breath catch. Photos. Event after event. Award ceremonies. Charity foundations. Board meetings. His face beside government officials, celebrities, and world leaders. She looked up, stunned. "Richard, what is this?" The crowd leaned closer. Someone whispered, "Wait, isn't that the billionaire philanthropist who disappeared from the spotlight 2 years ago? The one who built hospitals anonymously?" Murmurs turned to gasps. Phones were lifted. Cameras flashed. Richard finally spoke, his tone calm and clear. "I never told you who I was because I wanted to see who you'd be without knowing." He turned toward Linda. You saw a cleaner and felt superior. She saw a man and felt empathy. That's the difference between pride and grace. Adanna's heart pounded. Everything around her blurred, the music, the whispers, even the cameras. All she could see was him. Linda collapsed into a chair, her hands trembling. Derek slipped quietly toward the exit, avoiding everyone's gaze. And Adanna. She could barely breathe. Richard turned to her, eyes gentle now. You treated me like a person, not a title. That's something I haven't experienced in a long time. Her lips trembled. Why didn't you tell me? Because, he said softly. I didn't want to be loved for what I have, but for who I am. The hall was silent, every heart hanging on his words. Adanna blinked back tears. For once, the whispers around her no longer mattered. The room that used to mock her now stood still, watching the woman they once pitied, standing beside the man who just turned their judgment into awe. But even as the truth settled, Adanna didn't move. She didn't smile or gloat. Her voice was quiet when she said, I never wanted this to happen. I just wanted them to stop laughing at me. Richard smiled softly. Sometimes the only way to silence laughter is with truth. The night ended in a storm of whispers. Phones buzzed, messages flew, and the once proud family hall now carried the uneasy silence of humbled hearts. Richard had excused himself quietly, his hand brushing Adanna's shoulder as he left. I'll call you tomorrow, he'd said softly. She could only nod, still too overwhelmed to speak. When the guests finally dispersed, Adanna stood alone outside the hall. The air was cold, carrying the faint scent of rain. Her mother approached slowly, eyes soft with something between shock and guilt. Adanna, she began, her voice unsteady. Why didn't you tell me? Adanna turned toward her, tired but calm. Would it have mattered? You wouldn't have believed me. Her mother's lips trembled. I just wanted what was best for you. No, Adanna said gently. You wanted what looked best. The older woman sighed deeply, her shoulders sinking. I didn't realize. I pushed you too hard. Adanna managed a small smile. You just wanted me to be happy. But happiness doesn't always wear a ring. Her mother reached out and squeezed her hand, a silent apology, one that didn't need words. Later that night, Adanna lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying every moment. The laughter, the humiliation, the revelation. She felt raw, stripped of pretense, yet strangely free. She thought of Richard, the way he spoke, the quiet strength in his eyes, the kindness that didn't need to announce itself. He wasn't the man she had imagined asking for help, but he had become the man she could no longer forget. When her phone buzzed, she grabbed it instantly. A message. Can we talk? Richard? She replied, Yes. Minutes later, a knock came at her door. He stood there, still in the same suit from earlier, his tie loose, his expression soft. Couldn't sleep either? He asked. She shook her head, stepping aside to let him in. For a while, they didn't speak. The silence between them felt comforting, the kind that didn't need filling. Finally, she whispered, You must think I'm ridiculous. He smiled faintly. Why? For pretending. For lying. For dragging you into this. Richard sat down across from her. You didn't lie. You just tried to protect yourself. That's not the same. She met his gaze, her voice small. But I used you. And I allowed it, he said. Because I saw something in you that I haven't seen in a long time. Humility. You didn't treat me differently when you thought I was a cleaner. You spoke to me with respect. That's rare. Her throat tightened. I didn't mean to make you reveal who you are. I chose to, he said simply. Not for them, for you. Her heart fluttered at his words. Why? He leaned back slightly, his eyes searching hers. Because you reminded me of myself before wealth made people afraid to speak honestly to me. Tears welled in her eyes. She didn't know whether to apologize or thank him. So she did neither. Instead, she whispered, I don't know what happens next. Then don't rush to find out, he said gently. Some stories are meant to unfold slowly. The way he looked at her, calm, patient, sincere, made her chest ache in the best way. For the first time in years, Adanna didn't feel small. She felt seen. They talked until the night surrendered to dawn. When he finally stood to leave, he turned at the door. I'll see you soon, he said. And, for once, Adanna believed it. Weeks passed. The story of the cleaner billionaire had spread like wildfire online. Blogs wrote about it. Social media turned it into a lesson about humility and love. But for Adanna, the noise didn't matter anymore. Her life had changed quietly, not in luxury, but in peace. She had started volunteering at one of Richard's charity centers, helping underprivileged women learn new skills. It felt purposeful, grounding, real. One afternoon, while she was teaching a group of young girls how to write simple business plans, she heard familiar laughter behind her. She turned, and there he was. Richard. He looked casual, wearing a simple white shirt and jeans, his presence instantly lighting up the room. The children ran to him, shouting his name. He greeted each of them with warmth, as if they were equals, not beneficiaries. When their eyes met, time paused. "You didn't tell me you'd be visiting today," she said, smiling. "I wanted to see how you're doing," he replied. "And maybe steal a few minutes with my favorite teacher." She laughed softly. "I'm sure you say that to everyone, only when it's true," he said. They stepped outside after the session, walking under the fading evening sun. "I keep thinking about that night," she said quietly. "It feels like a lifetime ago." He nodded. "Sometimes the hardest nights are the ones that show us who we really are." She looked at him. "And who are you, Richard? Really?" He smiled, eyes glinting. "A man who almost forgot what sincerity felt like until he met you." Her breath caught. She wanted to look away, but his gaze held her still. He continued. "You saw me when I was invisible. You believed in me when I gave you nothing to believe in. That means more than anything I own." For a long moment, neither spoke. The wind brushed through the trees, carrying the faint scent of blossoms. Finally, Adanna whispered, "So what happens now?" He reached for her hand. "Now, we stop pretending." Her heart pounded. I mean, he said softly, "I didn't come tonight as the man you begged to act. I came as the man who wants to stay." Her tears fell freely then, not from pain, but from relief, the kind that comes when life finally hands you the peace you stopped expecting. Richard pulled her close, his voice barely above a whisper. "You see, Adanna, pride may walk with blindness, but humility sees love clearly." As the sun dipped beyond the horizon, Adanna rested her head against his chest, hearing the steady rhythm of his heart, the heartbeat of a man she once thought was pretending. But in truth, he had been revealing himself all along. And in that quiet moment, beneath the gold-tinted sky, she understood. What had started as desperation had become destiny, a story that didn't need validation, wealth, or applause. Just two hearts that found each other where pretense ended and truth began.